What's cracking? Welcome to my podcast, Love It or Leave It, where I discuss different books, shows, and movies, and I'll tell you if you should love it or leave it. Now, let's get cracking. So, we're starting with this, The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Before I picked up this book, I thought to myself, maybe it'll be good. Perhaps I'm being too judgmental towards this book, thinking that it was going to be depressing, crazy, and a wild ride. I was right. It was absolutely insane. Props to the author for writing this madness of a story, but it was one wild ride. My feelings afterwards, however, I just really hate Amir and his father with a burning passion, and no one can convince me otherwise. I would have been very content with this book ending in Amir dying, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So with the personal bias aside, we start with Amir and Hassan as young boys, two very different friends with very different moral values. Amir, who's very unsure, conflicted, he's guilt-ridden and emotionally stupid. Hassan, who's very loyal, pure, honest, and valued integrity. Their friendship was oddly resembled during the kite tournament in chapters 6 and 7. A kite is like the two boys' friendship. It needs a steady wind to stay in the air for it to stay steady. But the kite ended up deciding to crash down into a fiery pit of guilt, shame, and regret. The kite even resembles Amir's life and childhood as it crashes down with no way back up to bring it back up. And it plays heavily into the theme, even the conflict of the book, which we will get into later. But the theme of The Kite Runner, I would definitely say it's about how guilt does not mean to run away from your problems. Like Amir, due to his immense guilt, and only decides to realize how bad the situation truly was until it was too late to do anything, when it eventually and inevitably does catch up with him. Moving on to tone and conflict, The Kite Runner has Amir as the narrator for the entirety of the book, and it shows only Amir's perspective of the events throughout the story. Amir, in my opinion, is very biased to his own feelings, despite others having way worse issues than he does. It might just be me being very judgy, but Amir's a bit like an unreliable narrator, similar to Kuzco, but not as bad. Since he refuses to show anyone else's emotions in any other situation, leading to his own downfall, since he basically pelts Hassan in the face after some intense trauma. Amir just decides to add on to it. Amir's unreliability to narrate well leads and fuels the fire to his inner conflict with himself and his external conflict with Hassan, so much so that it drives Hassan away, leaving Amir to be guilty. That he just shoved away his best and only true friend at that time, leading to Amir's infamous quote of, "I've been staring into that deserted alley for 26 years, because he never came to terms with Hassan ever since the assault incident when the boys were around 12 years old, that one winter all those years ago, and Amir did nothing to stop what was happening." With character development, the book surprised me by actually deciding to give Amir a backbone for once, and to stand up to his past just once and for all, which was a shock to me, since throughout the story Amir was shown to be a terrible, self-centered person, only caring about himself for the most part. I guess the girlfriend effect really does exist. Moving on, Amir was shown to be a terrible person who was filled to the brim with guilt and jealousy, only truly making amends with his past when he and his wife adopts Hassan's son to save everyone from Asef, the boy who originally caused the rift between Amir and Hassan, inevitably ending up in their downfall, the two friends. Which, to summarize, guilt does not mean to run away from your problems. Amir's kite flying decides to symbolize his childhood, and his life is starting to crash down into ruins. Amir's very biased and unreliable as a narrator, for the reason that it basically causes the entirety of the story to take place in the first place. Instead of facing his problems, Amir chooses to leave it to rot underground until it digs itself back up to haunt Amir forever and ever until he makes his own version of amends when he adopts Hassan's son. Now, to finally move on to my favorite part of this whole thing, personal bias, where I finally decide to get to share whether or not you should love it or leave it. Personally, I did not enjoy this book whatsoever. Would I recommend it to a 9th grade class? Absolutely not. But would I recommend it to someone who would relate to this book? Perhaps. I find that Amir sucked as a main character. He was rude, he was self-centered, he pelted his best friend in the face. He's very unlikable as a person, if I do say so myself. So you should leave it! I was doing fine before I read this book, and nothing changed afterwards. This concludes my podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Love It or Leave It. Over and out.